We think about agentic commerce. Agentic commerce is really when a system is smart enough to go across multiple different systems, perform complex tasks, come back, and the job is done. To oversimplify what agentic commerce is. And so Shopware is building a bunch of agents ourselves using our own open source product to demonstrate how agentic commerce can work. But at the same time, we're encouraging people to build out agents as well. So today you might have an app store with a bunch of third-party apps. In the future, there could be a agent store.
Welcome to the Retailgentic Podcast, where we explore the intersection of retail, e-commerce, and AI agents, which we call Retailgentic. Our mission is simple. We are shining a bright light on the new agentic AI shopping megatrend, which will disrupt the trillion-dollar digital retail market. The stakes are high. Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Perplexity, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Anthropic are all fighting to be the consumer AI shopping agent winner. There are going to be some tough decisions for online brands and retailers to make. What happens to checkouts? How should payments work? Should you continue to invest in retail media networks? What does the world look like when over half of your traffic is not from humans, but from AI agents? These existential questions are the tip of the iceberg. On this podcast, we're talking to industry experts, analysts, and influencers to get answers to these questions, identify trends, and best practices. This is Retailgentic, your podcast partner in navigating our AI shopping agent future. And now here's your host, Scot Wingo.
Welcome back to the Retailgentic Podcast. Today, I'm excited for you to meet Jason Nyus. He is the General Manager of North America at Shopware. I guarantee you this is the only podcast you'll hear this year and maybe ever where in one conversation we talk about the Blackberry App Store and agentic commerce. Shopware is an e-commerce platform headquartered in Germany that's about 20 to 30 years old. Like Magento, Red Hat, MySQL, those types of companies, they're an open source company with a premium non-open source enterprise offering. It's kind of a freemium model where the open source is the free and the enterprise is the premium. It may be a brand you haven't heard of because it is European, but they're either number 7 or 6, depending on what you look at, in the ranking of e-commerce platforms by processing volume. So definitely a top 10 company there. Jason was previously at Digital River for 20 years, and in 2022 was recruited to run and open the United States for Shopware, where he is today. The reason we wanted to have Shopware on the pod is in July, they announced something called the Agentic Commerce Alliance. In this podcast, we learn all about the Agentic Commerce Alliance, what that means, what their vision is for this alliance, the types of companies they're going to have in there. Then we also get some insights from Jason where Shopware is taking the alliance, as well as some of the areas they're investing in around agentic commerce. And finally, we get Jason, his opinion, because he's been in e-commerce for quite a while. We get his opinion on where he sees agentic commerce going in the next 2 to 3 years. Enjoy the conversation. Jason Nyus, GM at Shopware. Welcome to the Retailgentic Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with your background. You and I were talking in the green room that it's shocking we haven't met each other, but this happens a lot in e-commerce. There's a Kevin Bacon. We're Kevin Baconed in e-commerce. So let's talk about your background.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be with you. This will be my own personal version of the Jason and Scot show.
Jason's just overhead with a big title, so that's all right. Middle management. We're kicking him out.
I love him. He's one of my e-commerce idols. I've had the pleasure of spending a decent amount of time with him, and he's amazing. I don't think we're probably going to talk about Amazon as much as you do on the other pod, but that's okay. I'm Jason Nyus. I've been in e-commerce for about 25 years. The lion's share of it was spent at a company called Digital River, which was a pioneer in taking brands direct to consumer. And the vision of that business was really to disintermediate retail and let the brands own that direct relationships with consumers. I was there 20 plus years and started as a customer success guy, worked all the way up to owning marketing, eventually owning partnerships, and net new revenue for the business. So I kind of saw it all through the evolution of commerce through many different phases.
Yeah. So Digital River is fascinating because everyone I've ever met that worked or has worked there or works there was always there for 20 years. Like, what's that all about? Is it just like that great of a place to work, or?
No, it was a tough place to work. In fact, it's no longer in business actually, but that's a different story. The what was really fascinating about it is you got a front row seat to the different eras in e-commerce. And at the early days, it was all around brands going direct.
Yeah, Microsoft was the first big customer, right? You guys helped Microsoft open basically an app store. We didn't call it that, but it was like a buy software online, or maybe it was like maybe it was like the keyboard or something. There was like something that Microsoft wanted to sell online, and you guys built it for it, and then that's like seems to be what catapulted the company. That's my outside observer of what Digital River did.
Pretty good memory. It goes back a little earlier than that. It was actually most of the software companies that were trying to sell software online and digital downloads, which was really the origin of the business. The first app store that Digital River ran was actually for Blackberry. Believe it or not. I'm sorry. No, I'm wrong. Nokia. Nokia had the first ever app store for developers to build apps for the Nokia devices.
So you got Snake for free, but Snake Plus, you had to go to the Digital River shopping cart.
That's exactly right. Yep.
But that was a funny business because no one did anything, and then ringtones came along, and like people were doing like $100 million a day in ringtones. It was just like bonkers. I remember you guys like rode that wave in there too.
Yep, we rode the wave. We did BlackBerry's app store. At one point, I remember the conversation. We had BlackBerry, and if you remember, I mean, we're old. So back in the day, BlackBerry was it, right? Everybody had one. And Google, we were in a conversation with Google around running their app store, and we declined because we were worried we'd have too much concentration in low margin app store business, and we already had BlackBerry. So we made good decisions.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories from that era where people chose the wrong horse. So then 2022, after 20 plus years, you joined Shopware. Tell us, what was the impetus there? What is, GM is one of those things that can mean a lot. It can be geographical, it can be a division. So tell us who is Shopware, why you decided to join, and what the GM role is all about.
Yeah, you bet. Well, so I think the last episode at Digital River, the last chapter of the book for me was at Digital River. I'll kind of rewind a little bit. So Digital River had finally made it to the leader quadrant in the MQ, the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And that put us up against 5 or 6 of the greatest other e-commerce platforms at the time that there were. And that list was Demandware, Magento, ATG, WebSphere, and Hybris, and Digital River. Okay, that's who was in the upper right of the MQ. Well, it was around that time that all 5 of those companies got acquired by IBM, Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, and Adobe. And so we were kind of the last man standing. We were a public company at the time, and we were the last man standing with regards to kind of being an independent company, not owned by some big software conglomerate. And we ran independent for a while and then realized that we couldn't outspend or out-innovate those big software companies. And so we facilitated a pivot, which was a really smart decision, frankly. So instead of being the commerce platform, we had this utility called Merchant of Record. And that Merchant of Record capability was really valuable if we could put it inside of Salesforce, inside of Adobe, inside of BigCommerce, et cetera. And so that's what we pivoted to do, and I was responsible for that pivot. Well, we did that for a number of years, won a bunch of meaningful customers, and my teams got to sell next to all of the reps from Salesforce and Adobe and the like. And what I realized in that tenure is almost everybody had the same kind of capability. They priced it a little different. They packaged it a little different. They described it a little different, but it was really a lot of the same utility. And in my mind, I thought we were at the point where we had mass commoditization of e-commerce and that, there was no real new feature innovation happening. And then I got a call from a recruiter about Shopware. And they were recruiting for the GM of North America, which is a geographic responsibility role, to take this business that is dominant in Germany. It's like 20% market share and the 3rd largest economy in the world, but it was very isolated to Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Benelux, and that's about it. And so when they approached me, my response was, who the hell is Shopware and why does the world need another commerce platform? And I started to dig into the product, realizing that it was modern. It was launched in December of 2019, which gave us a huge operational advantage in performance. And, it was a lighter weight in terms of the amount of code required, better architecture, et cetera. The way that was priced doesn't have to be a revenue share, which everyone else does. And we had 50,000 clients in almost every vertical. And it was designed around the context of the day. So mobility was built in, social commerce was built in, marketplaces, APIs, all of the things that today's e-commerce context, it was built with those in mind. It didn't have to retrofit into them. And so when I looked at this and said, okay, it feels different. I think the United States market actually needs this. And so that's why I jumped in and why I was really excited to be a part of Shopware, and it's gone really, really well.
Got it. You said my favorite word, marketplaces. So this comes with the ability to add its own marketplace, or it's just integrated with like one of the platforms like a Miracle or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. It works with a Miracle or it works with other market leading products. Yeah, but it's built to support it naturally. It doesn't have to be some custom.
It's not a Frankenstein jammed on the side kind of thing. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, 2019 predates Mock Alliance. Are you guys, part of that, or kind of, you adhere to it basically because you're composable and you're a more modern platform? Where do you fall in that Mock Alliance world?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I'm a big fan of Kelly and what those guys did with the Mock Alliance. It's really innovative and smart. But the fact is, some of the requirements around a certain percent of your customer installs have to be utilizing, I don't remember exactly what, but essentially we don't qualify to become a member of the Mock Alliance. Now, the principles of what Mock stands for, being microservices led, having an API first solution, being composable, being headless if needed, all of those things we are, and we're really good at it. It's designed with that intention. But no, we are not a member of the Mock Alliance, and frankly, I don't think we need to be.
Yeah, there's kind of like two parts. There's a philosophy, and then do you meet the criteria? And if your customers choose something else, it's not worth saying, well, we're going to have to fire these customers because to get to your percentage, we're not meeting. How dare you use our front end? We need to be 50% headless or something.
We actually talk about it in the context of practical composability. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we try to serve the mid-market, and the mid-market has future design needs to be able to use their own search or their own merchandising or their own whatever. But today's needs are, I need to do it economically. I need really good, not perfect utility. And so our strategy is to sell them the castle that is built of Lego pieces that at any point they can interoperably change them out to a market leader. And so that's kind of been our approach, and it's working really well.
Got it. This is more Rick Watson's world, but help me understand. You said mid-market, let's define that. And then another way these platform companies seem to be going is kind of a B2B orientation and a B2C. So help me navigate, if there was a mental map of where you guys are, the Shopifys of the world and Salesforce Commerce Cloud, where do you guys see yourself? Where's kind of like your spot on that diagram? Well,
first and foremost, we think Shopify is the greatest box ever invented for commerce. And if your brand fits in that box, you should probably buy from them. And anybody who's probably competing for the simple commerce use cases, which are, classically B2C, apparel, health and beauty, footwear, largely domestic. I think if you're competing with Shopify, you're going to lose. And it almost doesn't matter if you're small or large or anything in between. So Shopware's goal is to really help in search of the merchant who has more complex use cases. And what do I mean by that? I mean regulated industries, things like government, healthcare, fintech, outdoor retail, et cetera, those businesses, the rules of doing business change frequently. We also love the category of businesses with huge catalogs that don't lend themselves to being on a multi-tenant shared environment because of the amount of data inflow and outflow and just burden on a system. And then the third is really B2B, but more specifically, businesses who are distributors. And predominantly, we do really well there because there's enormous complexity, but also they do not want to pay a revenue share to a commerce platform. These businesses are normally making between 5 and 7%. They're a middleman by definition. And to share a half a point with the commerce platform plus 2.5 points for payments, that's 3 of the 6 they might make. And that's just a non-starter. And so Shopware's ability to charge a license fee to support any payment engine they want is really a big differentiation. So we crush when it's mid-market or above, and we do really well in the complex use cases.
And do you find mid-market by 100 million and up, or like more company size versus e-commerce size? Like how do you think about mid-market?
Yeah, that's a little more art than science. We can do the classic definitions of online revenue, but it more comes down to some of the use cases they want to support. The
complexity kind of like tips them over.
The complexity of their use case is more important than the size.
And I was reading up on it, and a lot of the descriptions I see describe it as open source, which kind of reminds me of Magento and all. So is this kind of the model? And we have Red Hat born here in the Triangle area, so I know that model really well, where they have this open source version you can download and use freely, like Magento had. But then if you want the supported enterprise version, you pay. Is that kind of y'all's model, or is there something different in there?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we have an open source product that is completely free to use, and then frankly, it's quite good. And it's purpose built for developers. And then we have enterprise class features that you can unlock based on your needs. We have 3 different plans. We'll call it good, better, best, but it's more aligned to the complexity of your business and how much you actually need. So plans can start out at really inexpensive and kind of go up to enterprise class plans.
Yeah. Couple more questions on Shopware before we jump into Agentic Commerce. Can you say, so it's a private company, right? Can you give us an idea of like how big, people or revenue range or something, just so we kind of know, is this like a smaller, like $20 million platform, or is this like up where like Commerce Tools is, or is this like bigger? Like help me place it on some scale there. Somewhere in the
I'd love to. Thank you for asking. So
I actually don't know how big Commerce Tools is, so I should have been a little more. I know they're big, but I don't know like how big they are.
Well, they're not that much bigger. But so Shopware is private. We're actually 30% owned by the Carlyle Group, which is like the second largest PE in the world, and PayPal. And so 30% private equity owned, 70% employee owned, which is a really important distinction. Being private is a big advantage. Number 2, I think this year we'll exit somewhere between 60 and 70 million in revenue. But what makes it really interesting, Scott, is we're probably the 6th or 7th largest commerce platform by processing volume. So somewhere in the $23 billion, $24 billion range this year we'll exit, which again puts us in the top 6 globally. Now, in terms of our revenue, like I said, 60 and 70 million, that doesn't even put us in the top 10. And so what that tells you is we're monetizing only the commerce platform, not the professional services business. We're not competing with our technology partners, and we're not taking a huge chunk of the payments business. That's what that tells you. So we're really, really focused on being a software company.
We'll come back to that in a minute. That'll be, everyone remember that. Put a pin in the checkout piece. That's going to come up later.
Yes, it will.
Does that number include, like, do you think of your impact, the open source piece as well? Because you may not even be able to track that. I remember Magento basically said, we know if we kind of host it, what's happening. We guess there's a bigger number, but it's just a swag. Do you guys have an element like that where you know on the enterprise version what's going on, but there's this whole other impact you're having that's really hard to track? Is that something that's a thing?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. It's complicated. So one of the things that when you decide you want to give away your product for free to the community, you're also giving up the ability to know everything that's happening all the time. And so, yes, there is thousands and thousands of people who've used our product, modified it to the point where you can't even see it Shopware, and they're using it. And so we do rely on tools like Built With and others to actually see who's using our product in a lot of ways.
So 2022, you decided I'm going to do this, and I imagine they had picked up some U.S. customers just kind of by happy accident. That kind of happens, but not, as you said, like the bulk was probably not here. How's it going? You're kind of in year 4. Have you started to find some beachheads and getting some wins and starting to carve out a space for the product here in the U.S.?
Yeah, actually a lot. We've had the first year was kind of a tough year. It was a bit of a transition. Inflation was hard. A lot of people were kind of clenching their wallets. But this is year 3, by the way. It's gone really, really well. Some customers that are notable, Dunham Sports and Up a Baby and Turning Point Brands, all examples of live customers, tons of B2B ones. At this point, if you were to go on Built With and look up Shopware United States, you'd see over, I think, 2,100 sites running on Shopware in North America. Combination of deals we sold in North America, combination of brands in Europe who've expanded here once we planted a flag, and open source customers using our product and having success with it. So we believe we are the fastest growing e-commerce platform in North America. But again, we're open source, so in a lot of ways that can be hard to prove.
I'm always jealous as a proprietary software guy, I'm always jealous as open source because it's this lead gen engine that's huge, right? Because the first thing I'm sure you did was you're like, who are the people using this free thing? And let me call all them and see if they want to upgrade. And, so I'm very envious of that freemium type business model that you have there. That's pretty amazing. Was that kind of like where some of your first early wins came? Just kind of harvesting that group that was out there in that community that kind of self-formed?
Absolutely. But in addition to that point, there's a whole bunch of people in the community of open source. And that was the big eye-opening moment for me of how much there's a community of like-minded people really pushing open source. And so, when Magento was acquired by Adobe, I think we can probably agree Adobe is world-class at serving the biggest companies in the world. And what they ultimately did is they continued to move the line of deals that they want to work on with their sales team, which essentially alienated a lot of the mid-market and all of the agencies who used to make all their money there. And so ultimately, a lot of these agencies were looking for alternative ways to continue to make money. And some of them went Shopify, in fact, a lot. A lot of them went big commerce. And frankly, it's a big reason big commerce was able to get public on the backs of a lot of those Magento merchants. And in Europe, we took over 3,000 merchants off Magento, and all of the agencies and devs who supported it benefited from it. And so we're, in a lot of ways, in North America as well, benefiting from the fact that Magento Adobe really doesn't target the mid-market as their primary go-to-market. So we've benefited there as well, Scott.
Let's see, there's the WordPress-based one. Are there any other big open source guys now that Magento's, I'm sure it's still out there and open source, but I don't know much. Actually had Roy Rubin on, but I didn't ask this question. I'm sure that they've kind of let the open source community atrophy, and I'm sure they're out there doing their own thing and forking the code and like keeping it alive, but it's not like they're nurturing it, I'm sure. Are there any other open source communities out there, or you guys kind of have filled that hole pretty dramatically?
I think there's plenty of, yes, there are. So WooCommerce is an open source product that does pretty well. I mean, there's still more Woo installs than Shopify, which blows me away.
In my mind, it's like, if you're mid-market, it's like super, super, super SMB solopreneur almost, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, in the mid-market, there's not a lot of open source companies we compete with. I hear Spree Commerce from time to time. Sailor is a developer-centric tool that gets adopted from time to time, but no real Oro Commerce in B2B, which is, the old Magento dev team kind of started Oro. But for the most part, there's not a lot in that market.
And then if we just look at mid-market and take the open source angle out, is it, I feel like BigCommerce has kind of like had to go kind of where you are because Shopify has just kind of walloped them on the parts you talked about, that the anything in that box, they've kind of pushed everyone out of that box. Is that kind of who you're up against a lot? Is the BigCommerce guys or?
Yeah, for sure. What's so funny is Shopify is such an amazing marketer and storyteller with such a huge network that whether they should or shouldn't be, Shopify is in every deal. BigCommerce is in probably half of them. And then we're usually up against, when I talked about those segments at which we have success, we're usually up against someone who has an ERP integration to their commerce platform as their core differentiator. And so it's names that aren't as mainstream as you would expect.
So because they're a manufacturer, they're using some ERP thing and it's just easier for them to slap on yeah. But that's like I'm sure a lot of those boomerang, because that's never going to be putting the pieces, it's very hard to be an ERP company and do this part well.
Exactly right. And even the ones who are commerce platforms who have that connection to the ERP are kind of old school tech. They're kind of sleepy. And so there's real opportunity to disrupt that market, which is what we're experiencing now.
Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the pod is you guys recently announced an Agentic Alliance. And that was the magic word. So we want to understand, what is that? What was the impetus? Your CEO there, Sebastian, he seems to have some religion. I've seen some of his talks about this on YouTube and whatnot. So tell us about that. Is that a thing that's in Germany now and coming to the US? So I want to know all the things. So hit us with everything about the Agentic Alliance.
Let's do it. So it's called the Agentic Commerce Alliance. And let me take a little bit of a step back. Most companies that have been in e-commerce and their founders started the business, and for us, it's 25 years ago. Sebastian and Stefan, these two guys in Germany, teenagers, started Shopware with a family project, turned it into a company, and now is, the 6th or 7th largest processing company in the world. And why does that matter in this use case is because these two brothers are still deeply, deeply involved. In fact, they're co-CEOs. And one of the brothers, Stefan, he'll describe himself as the nerd of the family, and Sebastian's a little more of the artist. Stefan, this is his brainchild, this Agentic Commerce Alliance. And the reason it matters is because he sees this as a massive moment at which the rules of how agentic commerce is going to get applied are being written. And the reason that this exists is because we want the future to be open. We don't want a few large companies who own your checkout experience, own your cart, can dictate how AI and agentic commerce is going to be done. It's a little bit like a proxy of having AOL try and own the internet as opposed to it being an open internet. And so that's this big moment. And the fact that Shopware is open, we've got modern technology, and we have an open ecosystem. And again, our goal is not to monetize everything. It's to be a great software company. And so we're inviting in any company who shares similar beliefs to participate and help write the standards for how open agentic commerce can happen.
Say a little bit more about that. So kind of hidden in there, or like I'm reading between the lines. Let me make sure I get this. You don't want to have a world where, and there's a Financial Times, this is in the rumor category. So in July, they had an article that and one of my early predictions in this, I thought it would take 3 years and it took 4 months, but that's AI for you. I kind of felt like if I'm OpenAI and then consequently all the other frontier model builders, the dominoes for me are they're spending hundreds of $billions on data centers and GPUs. And building these models and training them. They can't monetize it with ads because to beat Google, you can't do ads. You have to differentiate. So therefore, they're going to have to figure out how to monetize. A consumer subscription is one way. Open source to enterprise is another model. They're not choosing to do that. Maybe Llama will, but I think they're just more the destroyer of value. As is DeepSeek and some of the other open models in this world. They're less monetizing at all versus throwing a grenade and the whole thing. or you're going to have to pick off some verticals and figure out how to make money. And in a weird way, Shopify has shown us how to do this, back to the pin we placed earlier, by monetizing the checkout. So it seems like, and you're starting to see them start to build out the user experience by popping up product cards, showing a winner of the product card, and then today you agentically check out, or you get a redirect to a checkout or cart injection. Down the road, you'll just go right into a ChatGPT cart. So are you saying part of this is to kind of say, we also want a world where there's a vibrant, sure, that's one option, but there's a vibrant world of agents that, maybe they're verticalized. Maybe there's a fashion agent and a grocery agent and a piano agent or whatever. Or in the B2B world, I think that's naturally going to be verticalized, right? Because the way you buy an electronic testing machine is different than the way you do a electron microscope is different than a dental X-ray machine is different than. So I think so. Am I getting that ethos right? That you're trying to have at least an alternative to that world where you have these big platform companies that soak up everything.
That's exactly right. And I think we can all agree that we're still in very early innings on AI and the future is unwritten. And so we believe in a world where you wouldn't hardwire any decision. And what do I mean by that? We don't want to hardwire which platform, OpenAI, Perplexity, you pick, is going to be who we work with. We're not going to hardwire that you have to use PayPal or Stripe or Adyen or whatever payment engine we want or whatever wallet or checkout we want. We're not going to make hardwired decisions. We also believe that merchant or brands, this could be in a world where it could be the death of brands, and that would be a terrible outcome. So we want to give merchants the independence to differentiate, to romance their products, to let people pay the way that they want, to use whatever models on the back end and form a great experience. So we see this as a moment where open is going to be the winner, not closed, not hardwired decisions, but basically allow for a framework that allows for AI to really flourish.
Alliances can mean a lot of things, like we talked about the Mock Alliance, right? Where it's an ethos and then all these like requirements to get into the club kind of a deal. Talk a little bit more about like what's the structure of this? What are some of the types of companies, any companies that are in there that you want to announce? Have you guys built some features and functionality around this? And just so give me kind of like it was announced like 3 months ago, so pretty recently. I have to go look that up, but so it may be too early, but would love an update on where it is, and then we can talk about like where do you see it going.
Yeah, so absolutely. So the Agentic Commerce Association or Alliance, I say it wrong every time, is relatively new. I think it's 3.5 months since we announced it, and we've been overwhelmed with people who have applied. From people who absolutely belong to people who are just trying to run in front of the marketing story. And, one of the things about, our German owners is it's all about substance, and style will come later. And so we're really in the formation stage of having a small number of companies who we really feel have a strong voice as to where agentic commerce needs to go, how we create frameworks and publish out these things publicly. There are some big announcements happening in Germany, September 16th at our community day. I think this will probably publish after, but I can't pre-announce them. But there's some strategic partnerships. There's the commitment to openness, and we're going to announce some big, meaningful members as well.
So on our podcast, we've had there's some interesting payment companies, right? So you have the big guys. So MasterCard, Visa have all announced things. PayPal's announced a bunch of stuff. Stripe has. But then there's like several startups. We've had a company called Nakuda on. We're having another one called Fusat. There's once you cross the chasm into the crypto world, there's tons of all kinds of different crypto solutions, from stable coins and all kinds of stuff like that. Is that like a category of companies that you would see joining an alliance like this? Is kind of, so payments is a thing. And then there's lots of companies thinking about, different elements of agent building. So obviously, the checkout and payment is part of it. Also, there's how do these, how do we trust? There's trust layers, there's fraud detection, there's frameworks for building agents. There's MCP servers, A to A servers, MCP UI. There's like six. There's a new standard kind of being born every day, and so we're still early on how these things will talk to each other. Are those some of the types of companies? And then obviously the platform companies that I think your vision is you could build an agent on your platform will be very friendly to agents, and maybe you could build one. Like, is that kind of how Shopware factors in this?
Absolutely. So just to take a step back, we think about agentic commerce. Agentic commerce is really when a system is smart enough to go across multiple different systems, perform complex tasks, come back, and the job is done. To oversimplify what agentic commerce is. And so Shopware is building a bunch of agents ourselves using our own open source product to demonstrate how agentic commerce can work. But at the same time, we're encouraging people to build out agents as well. So today you might have an app store with a bunch of third-party apps. In the future, there could be a agent store that performs these agents. And so, yes, third parties are a big part of it. In fact, just had a conversation with a company called Vouched, which does a bunch of the basically validate who you are and allow you to do things online. And they envision a world where they have a new product called Know Your Agent. So instead of KYC that brands have to go and do business with, and when they file their payments paperwork, they have to do this KYC that they know who they are, what it's being used for. In a world where agents are going to be performing a lot of these complex tasks, Vouched has a Know Your Agent protocol that allows you to do business with an agent and trust that it's a good behaving agent that has the rights of the business to go perform it. So we're entering in a whole bunch of new use cases that we've never thought of. Let me make one more point. The entire last 25 years of e-commerce has been all about removing friction from doing commerce. Okay, I think we can all agree on that. It's all around multivariate testing and removing friction to optimize for a shopping experience. The removal of all that friction actually then inserts some risk from bad guys and bad behaviors and bad agents taking advantage of some of that reduced frictions. And so this is a really interesting kind of can of worms that we're getting into, which is why you need an Agentic Commerce Alliance to bring some of the smartest companies together and talk about designing a system to support the future state. It can't be done by a single commerce platform because we simply don't know enough or have enough broad of a view. We need the ecosystem.
Okay, so announced it 3 months ago, September 16th. We're going to see some more stuff. This is a great reason to have you back on the pod. And have you guys added any? So another use of agentic is I kind of think of it as external and internal. External is the things we've talked about, checkouts and new ways of these things interact with other systems. But then there's like a lot of retailers are getting big wins off of agents for customer service, thinking about inventory allocation, pricing, personalization, even Gen AIing and agentifying the loyalty program. Are these some of the things you guys are thinking on the software side, and then any features, or is that like a September 16th? There may be some news there.
Well, I'll give you an example because I don't want to be the guy that says, wait and listen. So one example of a use case we hear all the time, and there is utility to go do this already in the market, but a lot of our distributors are deeply, deeply paying attention to competing on price. And they know a small number regionally of different distributors they compete with. And their goal is to have a very kind of sensitive pricing strategy. So today they hire companies like PriceSpider or other third-party tools. They go and they research their competitive prices. They get that information at some frequency and they manually decide what to go do. Well, that is the perfect use case for an agent. And so you can, inside Shopware, we're launching a competitive intelligence. We call them Codies because we're a bunch of techies. And this Codie would go off, look at the sites you tell, look at the SKUs you tell, come back, tell us the price, and automatically adjust that price based on the rules you've set for those prices to happen. And so maybe you just want to know, maybe you want to change it, maybe you don't. But the system should be designed to go perform all those complex tasks across multiple systems and automate the job on the back office to do it for you included. And so that's part of an example of how agentic can take the blue collar work done by e-commerce teams and automate it.
Yeah, and those pre-2022 solutions, not to pick on PriceSpider, but we will, that they're built off very fragile scraping, and 80% of the time they break very easily. And there's the people that know distributor A is looking at B and C, they try to break them. So that adds to the fragility. And LLM-based agents are way less fragile, and they're because they have like a little brain inside of them. If you move the price around on the page, they're like, oh, I see the price. It moved from point A to point B, and now it's at point C. So not only is it automated, but it's going to be inherently more reliable and more robust than and more scalable than some of these pre-2022 solutions. That's what's so wild, having been in the industry for a while, is if you think about like the Digital River Blackberry store and like all this stuff that I've been behind a lot of those operations in that era, and there's there's a large percentage of transactions that result in things being printed out and people looking at them. And I remember being in a Sears room one time where they're actually pulling arms on registers and stuff, and it's just pretty wild to think about. Now we've got the little computers doing everything, and they're in many ways they're better than all those things we've ever done before because they're way more scalable and reliable.
Yeah. The interesting thing that nobody's talking about is what companies are positioned for the future. I mean, obviously the companies with huge R&D budgets are, because hopefully they can invest in chips and software and teams to go build the future. But frankly speaking, some of the upstarts, some of the people who have more modern tech that have kind of open thinking, those are going to be some of the recipes as who's going to be well positioned for the future. And that's part of why we created this alliance, to invite those companies to come in, to give them an opportunity to build agents, to give them access to our 50,000 clients, and really kind of invent the future. So that's why we did it.
Yeah. Cool. This is one you can opt out of. So, and I'll ask, is Jason the industry expert, not the GM of Shopware? But one thing I think that's interesting is, well, Shopify's good at, they seem to be able to inject themselves into like whatever's going on at ChatGPT and Perplexity. At some point, part of my theory is those companies get greedy or they want to capture that checkout. And there's not anything super proprietary about the Shopify checkout. It's basically Stripe with a one page and some features. Do you think they get cut out of that, or opt out not to talk about it? Or yeah, I think everyone's at risk. And all these existing models, they can pretty easily tip into an innovator's dilemma. So for example, I think Google's at risk. I think there's some Amazon risk. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to them. And I think Shopify feels inoculated for a while, but at some point, if you look at the data, they make like 70% of their revenue off the checkout. They're basically a fintech company. They're a small SaaS business with like a huge, checkout business where they basically make small percentages off a huge transaction volume. So it'll be interesting to kind of see, or in your your Agentic Alliance, what's the middle word? Commerce. Yeah. The Agentic Commerce Alliance, maybe there's this Cambian explosion of little agents, and they all have checkouts, and then in either of those scenarios, Shopify is not really running dollars to the checkout. So I kind of come to this conclusion, and I don't know which way it goes. I'm just kind of pointing out there's a cone of uncertainty there that's kind of interesting.
Well, it's very interesting, and I'll disassociate myself with Shopware for a moment and kind of talk about my perspective. I'm a Shopify shareholder. I'm a big fan of the company. They're amazing at what they've accomplished. You and Toby
have the same hairstyle?
Me and Toby, yeah. He's German. I'm American, but we both have the German connection. But let me say this: there are 18 vendors on the Gartner Magic Quadrant for commerce. If history is any guide, half of them in 5 years will be gone. They'll be acquired or they'll be out of business. Shopify has a lot of runway to do really well for a long time, and they should. They're a great company. That said, McDonald's, as a proxy, is not a burger company. They're a real estate company. Just like Shopify is not a commerce platform, they're a fintech. Okay. So there's a lot of parallels that companies can be really successful showing you one thing, but making money another. But there are, as you know, there are two great ways to make money in America, corporate America: bundling and unbundling. And so Shopify bundles payments with it today. And at the time it makes more sense to unbundle it and take the payment relationship direct, they probably will. And the Agentic Commerce Alliance, or Agentic Commerce itself, could be the potential great unbundling of commerce.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not barking up an entirely wrong tree there. You have to let us know when you sell your Shopify. That'll be the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Well, Jason, that's all the questions I had. Any topics you want to hit on while we're here? Anything I didn't cover that's top of mind with you?
No, I don't think so. I'm just excited to have you on the Commerce Famous podcast here coming up soon, where we get to flip the script and I get to ask you all the hard questions.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. A couple kind of like wrap up lightning round ones. So when I had Roy Rubin on, he basically kind of gets this conclusion where we're probably 3 years out. He kind of comes to the conclusion, and there's two ways he kind of has said this. We're 3 years out from there being websites that get used, that they're mainly there for an agent to read stuff. So that's one side of that coin. And the other one is he thinks we'll have $1 billion brand built without a website in the next 2 years. What's your reaction to that?
Well, Roy's smarter than me, so he's probably right. I'm just going to defer to he's probably right. But I'll say, anytime you get these predictions, you have a bunch of people who are trying to prove they're either right or wrong. And I think what's going to happen in B2B is you're going to take a lot of the transactions that are happening today through other offline means, and they're going to just attribute them to an agentic commerce use case, whether it fully is or not. So I do think that headline will be happening, that there's $1 billion business that doesn't even have a website. But I think it's mostly because of share shift and not because of value creation. That's what I think.
Yep. The other one I like to kind of ask guests is the PayPal CEO said by 2030, 25% of e-commerce will be agentic. Do you take the over, under, or agree with that?
I take the over, definitely. And I think Alex Chris is got his finger on the pulse here. Big fan of him and his positioning around agentic commerce. I will say I think that the pie is getting bigger. I think agentic commerce has the ability to serve significantly a larger portion of digital, as opposed to taking what is classic e-commerce today and shifting it to agentic commerce. So to me, the pie gets bigger, and yes, 25% is probably reasonable in that period of time.
Okay. And then the last one, Bernstein's a Wall Street analyst, and right now e-commerce is growing kind of 6.8% year over year. If you look at the U.S. Department of Commerce data, this is a U.S. number. I'm sure Germany is like a different set. But everyone's kind of seen this tapering off of growth where we were growing crazy, and now we've kind of slowed down to, we're still better than retail, but I would like to see us grow faster. But anyway, they've said that they believe agentic commerce in the next 2 years will accelerate that 1.5 to 2.5 points, which 2%. 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but on 6.8, it's actually a 25 to 30% acceleration. Do you take the over, under, or agree on that one?
I'll take the over, but it's going to be distributed very differently. So first off, Shopware is growing at like 38%. And so we are taking share. So I'm a bit biased on where I think growth is coming from, because we're seeing a lot of growth through new customer acquisition, not necessarily same source sales. Now, that said, again, there's 18 vendors on the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I think 5 to 7 of those are going to be winners and the rest are going to be losers. And so I think the industry itself will grow, somewhere around double digits, maybe 10, maybe 9%. But the people who win on it is going to be less distributed than classically. I think AI is going to separate the winners and losers in that regard. So hopefully I answered your question.
All right. That's a good place to wrap it up. Good luck with your conference coming up, and I look forward to being on your podcast.
Amazing. Thanks, Scott. A big fan. Super excited to be on the call.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Follow, rate, and share to stay up to date with Retailgentic, your guide to the future of AI shopping agents.